Hey everyone, this is Jen and you're watching BPD Woman. In today's episode, you're going to learn some tips and tricks, and I'm gonna answer the question, how do I make time for it all? How do I make time for it all when I'm so invested in therapy and DBT takes up so much of my life and the therapy and the homework? I feel so tired. Does this sound like you? Does this sound like a situation you've been in? I definitely have, and we're going to talk about it today. If you haven't done so already, please hit like, share, subscribe below. Do me a favor, help out the channel. Let's get going. For those of you that are new or just returning, thank you. My channel offers positive solution-based approaches to BPD recovery. You'll also find help if you have CPTSD or if you find yourself a highly reactive or emotional person. My goal is to share my wisdom, experience, and nuance in actually putting forth the DBT skills in motion, right? We learn all of these skills in DBT, but like, how do they really work? And I was diagnosed 20 years ago, though I believe I've lived with the disorder for 30 years. I've done about half a dozen DBT classes. I've done group therapy, homework therapy. I've done one-on-one. I have the workbooks I do at home. I've done research. And more than that, I really commit to actively working on these skills. And so, although I'm not a therapist or a psychologist, I can answer one very important question that will give you an edge up, which is, what is it like to live with borderline personality disorder? If that all sounds good to you, let's keep going. So we did a video a couple of weeks ago, and I had a response in that video, in that comment section, which was freaking fantastic. So thank you, GRTORMAND3, that is the person that wrote it, who wrote this. How do we recover from BPD and have time for other aspects of our lives? Not that other aspects of my life are all that great, but I have to work and bring an income. In the US, we only get a limited amount of time off, and like most of us, I worry a lot, exclamation point. So I wrote back, excellent question. In fact, I think this is a good topic for a separate video. And then I replied, the way that I approached it was like going to college, getting a PhD, with the mindset that recovery, DBT classes always came first and everything else came second, and that it would take years of study and practice. Some people approach it like a relationship. Other people might liken it to recovering from alcohol abuse. For me, if I wasn't emotionally in control, work and all other aspects of my life were pretty destined to suffer anyways. So I saw the recovery as a center from which everything else would come. And I wrote, and I worked a full-time job as well. No one living with me or helping me financially, so I do get that it's an exhausting juggling act. So great comment. Thank you so much. And I want to talk about this because this is such a great point that I don't think you see enough in DBT videos, or no one really tells you like how fucking exhausting this is all going to be, and it's exhausting. Let's just go back to an analogy that I've used several times, which is this analogy of fibromyalgia. So if you know what fibromyalgia is, basically it's a series of symptoms with no known cause, but it causes pain, nerve flare-ups, body aches, extreme sensitivities to pain. It can really literally cripple people and affect their daily lives. And I liken having BPD to having emotional fibromyalgia. So that like the skin is exposed, right? Just imagine all of your skin has been burned off, and that everything that touches you feels 10 times worse, right? And so going into this discussion, I want you to keep this in mind, because we are not like normal people, not at least in the way that we handle our emotions and that we process some thoughts. We sometimes rely a lot heavier on distortions. So you're not going to be able to fairly compare yourself with someone else exactly in your position and say, why can't I do it like them, right? Like I have a kid and I'm always stressed out, but she has a kid and she seems to do it perfectly, right? I live alone. I'm financially struggling, but she lives alone and she seems to be flourishing. Why is that? Not only are comparisons not generally very helpful anyways, but it's like comparing apples and oranges. They're still fruit, right? But they're very different in their texture and in their nature and where they come from. So the first rule here is please don't try to make comparisons to anyone else, because it's just going to drive you absolutely crazy. So second of all, I want to share a little anecdote. When I was in a DBT class, maybe about 5 years ago, there was another girl in the class. And, DBT is very intensive, right? And so, you're going to 2 90-minute sessions a week, and you're going to 1 60-minute in-person counseling session with your psychologist, plus you're getting phone coaching. So it's a lot. There's a lot, and it's draining. It's not like going to a movie and feeling refreshed, right? Or going to the beach and feeling relaxed. There's nothing easy about this entire process, which you are likely to repeat several times throughout your life. So I remember saying something like, in the presence of this girl in the group, I said, I'm really trying to work on, my relationships with like my boyfriend or whatever, something like that. It was a personal relationship. And she said, I don't even know how you have time for it, because I just feel exhausted at the end of the day working through and dealing with the relationships that I have at work. So that's a starting point, is that because we have this emotional fibromyalgia, and because scientifically it's proven we feel things longer, more intensely, and it takes longer for us to come to baseline, the more stimulus or stressful events, and even happy stressful events that you come through, a happy stressful event meaning like a job promotion or a social gathering, are going to exhaust you physically. It's going to take something out of you. Think of the last time that you had a really bad crying spell, or that you were angry for a really good portion of the day. Like just this past week, I have this problem with this neighbor, and we haven't had like a physical altercation, but like it's just, you can feel the tension. I was so mad. So I went on the internet and I started looking for videos like on how to reduce my reactivity and how to calm myself down. But by the end of that day where I was really angry, I was exhausted, right? I was exhausted. And that's because it takes so much energy. And so what this person in this DBT class was saying was that, she feels so just emotionally drained throughout the day from dealing with those instances and trying to deal with the work stuff effectively, that she didn't even feel like she could have time for a personal relationship. And this kind of goes back to what my viewer here was saying. It's like, my life's not that great. And by the way, thank you for your honesty. And I get what he's saying, right? Like, I feel the same way. Like, I have a few friends, but I'm not going out on a bunch of dates. Like, I'm not like hitting the town. I'm not throwing a bunch of social gatherings. I have my work, I pay my bills, I plan for vacations, I keep in touch with my friends. It's kind of boring, right? So it's important to manage your time and to be cognizant of the fact that therapy is going to be exhausting. Now, why? Why is therapy so exhausting? We know why, the day-to-day interactions with people or work can be exhausting. I mean, on top of that, work is just a physically exhaustive process and a cognitive exhaustive process. Then you're trying to throw in the skills that you're learning in DBT. Oh, should I do my Dear Man here? Oh, is this a good time for Give or Fast? Oh, I'm upset. Maybe I should do a radical acceptance strategy, whatever it may be. So you're trying to juggle all of these things. And so therapy is really exhausting on several levels. For one, you're learning. So this is, again, what I went back to, that I approach this kind of thing, recovery, like going to school and getting a PhD. Think of a PhD candidate. Think of when you went to college or high school, whatever, just something. It took a lot of energy, right? You had homework every night, right? You had papers to write. You had to answer to people. You may have had to give speeches or presentations. And that's intensive. And so thinking of it like that, I think for a few things, puts a few things in perspective. One, the length of time it's going to take you to accomplish all of these things. And two, that this becomes the most important thing in your life. And this is the central thing here. The DBT and the BPD recovery has to become the most essential thing in your life. So to answer our viewer's question, how you handle it, how you split your time is obviously very personal to each person, but 75% of your effort should be focused on that DBT. And I did a video about goal board setting, and you can check that video out. I'll put a link above. But in my previous goal boards, at the center, I wrote mental health DBT. So for like 1 year, that was the center of my goal board. And from that DBT center was things like relationships, money goals, work goals, social goals. That everything I saw came from the center of that recovery. Because if I'm not in recovery, then all of those other things I just mentioned are going to be either on shaky ground or they're going to fail. So therapy is exhausting, not only because you're learning all of these skills and trying to keep them in practice, much like speaking a new language, like learning French or Spanish, but it's emotionally traumatic, draining. It's going to take you to places you don't want to go, and then you're going to live in those places for a while. You're going to talk about the abuse. You're going to talk about things that happened to you. Memories are going to come up that maybe you don't want to have come up. You may find that you're getting nightmares. There's a certain ex of mine, and that when there are days that I'm thinking about him, I have a really terrible nightmares at the end of that day. So it can be very emotionally exhausting. And so again, that's another thing that you're going to have to prepare for. If you have trouble prioritizing the DBT coming first, you're going to have to make some really rigid goals for yourself and some really rigid time limits. That means that you make sure that you're always on time for class for DBT. I mean, I saw people, I worked late. I did this. And I mean, those people probably have a super lower rate of recovery than if they're there all of the time. Because if it's not a priority for you to be there in person, then how is it going to be a priority for you out of class? So you'll have to make this deal with yourself and manage how you're going to do your time, right? Whether that means you have to find a babysitter to be able to get to class, whether that means 30 minutes before anyone else anyone else gets up in the morning, you're doing your DBT homework or you're checking in with your therapist, right? So those are some different structures. So if that means that you're going to have to stave off certain days of the week and say no, then you'll have to get good at saying no. It means budgeting your social time, right? Keeping an exercise, keeping a sleep schedule planned, keeping a work routine, right? Some people call that sleep hygiene. Making a strategic schedule for yourself so that you're not caught off guard. Schedule gives us regularity, and a regularity, I believe, gives us emotional stability. At least it definitely helps. So there's all kinds of trackers for that, right? You can set quiet hours on your phone. You can have sleep mode. There's all sorts of meditation apps, and they work. Believe me, I really believe that they work. So you'll have to defend those times and be realistic with your times, right? You can't make unrealistic goals, because if you do, then you're going to get upset and you're going to get yourself on an emotional Ferris wheel, and then you're going to be stuck in some emotional dysregulation. Setting goals, right? So each week I am going to use 3 Dear Mans, right? Or this week I'm going to try to use this skill that I learned 4 times, or I'm going to journal every single day. And at the end of the week, if I've done all that, I'm going to reward myself with whatever, I'm going to reward myself with, like, there's this really expensive ice cream place near where I live. And it's like a special kind of event. So it's like, okay, I've completed all of my homework this week and I did a little bit extra. And so I'm going to reward myself by buying myself a really nice gallon of ice cream from this place, right? So reward systems. Limiting relationships is another thing that I highly recommend, or not starting them when you're going into DBT. Obviously, if you have a boyfriend or a spouse, whatever, you know, and they're supportive, hopefully they are, or there may not be much success for your relationship. But if they're supportive, try bringing them in on some things. I've created another video about kind of resources for the family and books they could read. Loving Somebody with Borderline Personality Disorder by Dr. Sherry Manning. That's a great book. Stop Walking on Eggshells by Dr. Randy Krieger. That's another great book. Getting them involved in your therapy to some extent. So letting them know what you're going through and then being honest with them. Look, I'm really exhausted, right? I'm really upset. Maybe on the way home. I just came from class and it was really a tough one for me. And I'm going to need to take a bath by myself for a while, right? So that's how to kind of manage relationships that you might already be in, but limiting new relationships, right? So for instance, it's not a good time to start looking for a boyfriend or girlfriend. It's not a good time to change jobs. It's not a good time to, start inviting new friends into your life. I'm not saying, this is a hard and fast rule, but why give yourself the extra challenge of doing all of that while you're trying to focus on the PhD that you're trying to earn, right? Again, the steady routine, the sleep schedule, the exercise schedule, making sure you're eating right, getting a massage, self-care, that's all good things. Another thing I caution is make your friendships and your alliances and your DBT classes, because they're people that are going through things just like you are, but be very careful. And be careful not to get too enmeshed, because they are in recovery just like you. And so their thought patterns are not always going to be clear. They're going to often have distortions. They may be trying to commiserate with you, and maybe that's not going to be very helpful to your recovery. So it's nice to have people that are aligned with you, that know what it's like to have BPD, and that they know what it's like to go through these kinds of worry cycles or anger cycles. But be careful not to get too enmeshed, because if things go awry or you feel like you need to create some distance, it can be very hard to do, especially if you have 10 more weeks of DBT to go through with them. So just be careful. So, Jen, when does my life get easier? Okay, let's talk about that. So if you've really made this commitment and you've really put forth the effort, congratulations, you're gonna get a diploma, right? You're gonna feel like you're graduated. You're gonna start to see changes in your life, that your BPD is getting better. And I just did a video about that, which has become quite popular. 10 signs your BPD is improving. And once you see some of those signs in your life, then you can start graduating yourself. Maybe it's time to start casually dating. Not jump full in. Don't be black and white about it, right? Maybe it's time to look for a new job. Maybe it's time to improve or expand your friend circle. Maybe it's time to make a move to a different place, right? These are the times to start introducing small changes. You just don't want to overwhelm yourself. And again, remember, you're not like the normal person. You have emotional fibromyalgia, and that's not going away, guys. That's not ever going away. I want to be very clear. The things that you can concentrate on are your reduction of reactivity, your reduction of anger, anxiety, your reduction of the way that you cognitively think, the way that you act that's not effective or helpful into getting what you want, reducing lashing out. But you're never going to get away with being a very sensitive person. That's just never going away. That's another video I did. Am I too sensitive? Yes, you are. That's who you are, and you're great. You're an empath. So embrace it, because I think a lot of people are drawn to that personally. People think we're warm, we're willing to go out. I was just coming back in with the dog. I was going to make this video, but I saw one of my neighbors and she was saying that she might need a jump. And I was like, I have jumper cables, text me if you need something, right? We go out of our way. But again, just be mindful that it doesn't go into that black or white, that it stays in that gray. The decision whether to enter in or try relationships also can be met with some fear on your part. Like, I'm still a bit afraid to get into a romantic relationship. I'm afraid of making a wrong decision again. I'm afraid of getting hurt or getting so depressed that I feel in fear for my safety. I don't want that to happen. Of course, I don't really want to avoid romance the rest of my life, but right now it's not something that I really feel like I need. I feel like I'm focused on my work and making money and moving in like the fall and going on a nice vacation maybe in the winter. I'm not worried about his feelings or getting into a relationship, or I really just don't even have time for that right now. So life does get better, and I promise you, you're gonna see it get better. But like I say all of the time in lots of my videos, there are no quick fixes. There are no overnight solutions. And once you have graduated, right, you've done your PhD of DBT, and you feel these skills are becoming more intrinsic and natural to you, it's going to be maintenance. It's going to be, you get a new car, right? You just never take it to the mechanic again, right? You got to get its oil changed, and sometimes you got to replace the alternator, and you got to make sure that the wipers work, right? And that's the way to kind of look at your mental health recovery. You may have little relapses. You may find your mind trying to take you down a black and white thinking route or a catastrophizing route, right? It's got to challenge that. So it does get better, but again, you're gonna need patience. I hope this video is helpful. Let me know what you think. Do you relate to this topic? What are some of your tips for balancing your recovery with your life? Let me know. Until I see you next time in everything you do, please be effective. Bye-bye.